Before I start in on what I want to talk about this afternoon, this evening, I want to set the ground rules here. Where I'm coming from as Executive Director of the Vermont Independent Schools Association. We are pro-school choice and we are pro-local control very strongly. Those are core principles. We are politically nonpartisan, so I'm not going to take sides with political parties in any way. We do assert that independent schools are a valuable resource, valuable part of the overall education community in Vermont. But today I'm here to provide information and perhaps a little bit of advice, but certainly no advocacy. Your decisions are your own. Back to the point about pro-local control. So that's where I'm coming from. Vermont has two educational communities. There's the public school community that everybody knows about. It's around 77,000 students this year, pre-K through 12. Whereas in the independent schools, it's also pre-K through 12, around 9,200 students. Then below that, let me make my clicker go. Okay. The governing structures are different. Public schools are municipally governed. Independent schools are self-governed. Nearly all of them are nonprofits. There's 134 independent schools versus, I'm not sure exactly how many distinct schools there are on the public side in Vermont, but there's 270 odd districts and 67 SUs. That's all in flux right now as Act 46 begins to move. But the key things are down here in the bottom in that blue box. On the public side, school choice is infrequent to never, and the mission is comprehensive education. Whereas on the independent school side, school choice is always available, and the mission is defined by each school. And we'll go into that more deeply as I go along. Independents are under state oversight. You heard just a moment ago the term recognized schools, approved schools, and there are also accredited schools. These are important terms, so I'll spend a moment on that. Recognized schools, of which there are about, as I recall, I'll get to the number in just a moment with a chart, but there are a couple dozen. They are ineligible for public funds. They are largely unregulated. Basically, the only thing that they have to do is once a year they have to report who is attending so that the truancy laws can be enforced. Anybody who wants to do business where you're getting public funds wants to be in the approved category. They're in the middle. In that case, as an independent, you have to meet standards that are set by the State Board of Education for teacher qualifications, course of study, physical facilities, and financial capability. Now, none of those are highly specific. It's just that you have to be able to prove that you can do a good job and that you're not going to leave anybody abandoned if suddenly you have to go out of business. Accredited schools are the next step beyond approved. Accreditation comes from a third-party organization called the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, otherwise known as NEASC. NEASC accreditation is very rigorous. It usually takes a candidate school 18 months to 2 years to go through the entire process. A great deal of it is self-study and internal discussion, followed by a week-long visit of a visiting team of heads of schools from elsewhere. They go through everything that the self-study has brought up and then finally give a yes or a no. An accredited school is immediately accepted by the State Board of Education as approved. So once you get accredited, as long as your accreditation is in good standing, you can be an approved school. So long term, if you were to have an approved school in Stowe, you probably would want to be getting accredited. It's good for you, it's good for your students. Some myths that I typically run into. Independent schools are only for elite students. Independents serve only a few Vermont children. Too costly, no special education, low teacher quality because teachers aren't licensed. All incorrect. And you'll see why as I go a little farther along. So here are the models that you may want to consider. The unique mission model, as I said, is for the ski academies. There are a couple of other schools that are in that category as well, such as Kern-Hatton Homes down in Westminster that takes in children whose families are dysfunctional or not available. There's Vermont Academy of Science and Technology down at Vermont Tech, for example, very narrowly focused model. The general education model, nearby, you don't have anything terrifically nearby Stowe, but schools that you may hear about, some are the Sharon Academy down near White River Junction, and Orchard Valley, which is a Waldorf education school over in East Montpelier. Very successful school, has an enrollment of about 180 now. Then the Town Academy model, and I think this is where you're headed if you go in the independent school direction. This is a subset of the general education model. There's no formal definition of what is a town academy. So it's a term of art, but it's not in law anywhere. In general, what we're talking about is a school that voluntarily steps forward and says, we will fulfill the mission of a comprehensive general education school in a community. But that isn't all we'll do, because we're independent and we have the privilege of setting our own mission, so there are other things that we're going to do as well. And so, for example, if you're Burton Academy, they are running an outdoor program up on Bromley Mountain. If you're St. Johnsbury Academy, they run a boarding program for some 300 kids from overseas. North Bennington is more narrowly focused currently. They are pretty much just the elementary school for the North Bennington Independent District. But they certainly are beginning to think about broadening their mission, because that broadens their appeal and brings in more students. A couple of pictures. And these are interesting because most every independent school I visit is not it doesn't look like a school. I mean, Burton looks like a church. Thetford Academy, this is a building that was built in 1942, but I don't know, it looks more like an elementary school than a high school to me. The Village School of North Bennington, that used to be North Bennington High School back in the day. Mountain School of Winhall was a school, an elementary school, and that just transitioned into the independent school. But look at this. Here are the presidents at the time of the founding of two of those schools. The point here is that independent schools long predate public education in Vermont. In fact, there were a lot of academies that are no longer with us. Peacham Academy, Leland and Gray Academy, the two BFAs off to the northwest, several others. In the 19th century, they were the answer when somebody wanted a beyond 8th grade education. Black River Academy in Ludlow, another one. So that there's history here and continuity with the past in the way independence. Under governance, it's the standard nonprofit model. If you've ever served on the board of a nonprofit, you know what that looks like. You're tax exempt under the IRS rule 501c3, governed by a board of trustees. The board has a very specific role. It sets policy, it makes long-range plans, it raises money, and its most important function is to hire the head of school. Then the head of school runs the school. The head of school in the independent world is the superintendent and the principal. And the board stays out of day-to-day operations, it stays out of hiring and firing. It simply has one employee, the head of school. And the head of school is accountable for everything.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sure. No, go ahead.
And typically, how are those boards elected?
Good question. I think I have a slide for that later, but I'll address it right now. You can do it however you want. Now, if you're North Bennington, for example, it's all local community people on their board. The St. Johnsbury Academy, which has been around since 1850 something or other, has a large board that includes both local people and some people from far off. The slogan very often that you hear nonprofits talk about is, we want either your time or your money. And so some of the people on the St. Johnsbury board are heavy-duty donors, and they are not living in Caledonia County, Vermont. They're in Lord knows where. So they come to town 2 or 3 times a year and meet and dispose of school business. I served on the board of the Sharon Academy for 4 years. That board was entirely local, and their ethic was that they wanted only local people, and they wanted people who had time more so than money.
And they're elected at the membership, by the membership
It's
at
a
the time?
self-perpetuating board, like any nonprofit. Now, there is one other example where the Thetford Academy decided they wanted to have a member on their board that was elected. So from the Thetford School Board comes and sits on the board at Thetford Academy. All of those are options that are open to you. You can structure this any way you wish as a nonprofit.
Is that board appointment an indefinite time period, or is that?
Once again, you can write your bylaws, you know, you can have terms that have limits, or you can have them open-ended. Independent schools, now let's talk about admissions for a second here. I want to emphasize this point. This is very important. No school must admit everybody, even the public schools. There's a distinction between the school and the municipality that runs the school. In education jargon, that's the LEA, the Local Educational Authority. So here in Stowe, the Stowe School District is the LEA, and it operates the schools. So if a student is a danger to themselves or others, the school can legitimately say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. That's not appropriate. But that doesn't take away the responsibility of the local educational authority to provide an education for that student. There are other alternatives for doing that. And throughout Vermont, schools make judgments all the time, usually in the special ed area. Can we meet this student's needs? Or does that student need to be referred to one of the independent schools that I mentioned earlier that specializes only in certain kinds of special ed? An independent school in particular, certainly in the accreditation business that I was talking about, is ethically bound to exercise judgment. Does our school fit the needs of the student? And does our school fit the needs of the community? If schools are mission-driven, and if they exist for the benefit of the community, and if all admission is voluntary, therefore the students can walk at any time, you are bound for your own survival to match the needs of the community as closely as possible. So, special ed. The town academy schools cover all the categories of special ed. That's different kinds of disabilities. That's not about severity. So somebody who's severely autistic, for example, or somebody who is quadriplegic with cerebral palsy, for example, who you may not be able to meet those needs in the physical facilities you have or with the budget that you have. So those students go off to special schools just as you would do in a public school setting. The funding doesn't change. Responsibility for special ed remains with the school district, not with the school, no matter where the student is being educated. Teacher quality. Teachers are not necessarily licensed in independent schools. When I go to an independent school, they tell me typically maybe a third to a half the teachers tend to be licensed because there's a lot of public school teachers out there who are looking for jobs occasionally. The head of school is the one who makes the determination if somebody is qualified or not, and if they can perform in the role that is trying to be filled. This is one of the most crucial roles that the head plays. In the independent school world, all of that responsibility is right there. So the head has to produce a happy, engaged, healthy, effective faculty. There's no teachers' unions in any of the independent schools. The ethic about how one performs one's work responsibilities if you're a teacher in an independent school is different. There tends to be more engagement in non-classroom activities among students and teachers in the independent school world. Less formalism. How is an independent school held accountable for working? principally through school choice. The students can walk away tomorrow from any independent school in Vermont. And believe me, administrators are acutely aware of that. They think about that all the time. Are the students happy? Are the administrators and teachers engaging them in a positive and constructive way? There are examples of schools where an administrator has made decisions that did not go down well, and students started leaving. That was a message right away. It's nature's way of telling that school that it's time to make a correction.
Well, and can I just
Yes.
interrupt? So the reason that that's so important is because the school is counting on those tuition dollars for that student to keep operating, so that if a student is unhappy and goes, then those are tuition dollars that the school is losing.
Instantly are out the door. That's right. Now, there's other ways the community can hold the school accountable. Tuition rates have to be set. And there's a school budget vote, because remember, the LEA is still there, even if it's not operating a school. There's going to be a budget. And the LEA has to write the check for the tuition to that independent school. And if the school board doesn't like what's going on, the school is going to be in trouble. If there's a contractual relationship between the district and the school on a building lease, for example, or a playground lease or something like that, that's another area where there's some accountability back and forth, and that can be written into the contracts. And certainly there can be community representation on the board. In fact, the board would be largely a community board, I think. What about public funds? As I say, the public school district doesn't go away. It just becomes what is called in this trade a non-operating district. So the district still has legal responsibility for the education of those students. It still writes a budget. It still gets the money from Montpelier, and then it turns around and it writes checks for the students that would, if they were here in Stowe attending this school, or if the students elect that they would rather go down the road to Harwood or up to People's Academy or to, I don't know, Northfield, Mount Herman down in Massachusetts. It's fine. That's school choice. If you're a school choice town, that's what happens. And the money is there. And certainly there's no change in special ed funding. That works just as if you were a public school. Here's how the tuition numbers look currently. The statutory reference is up there. You can look that up if you want. Those statutes explain how this works. There's a thing called the statewide average announced tuition. This is what a school district sending a child to an independent school must pay at minimum. Then districts may vote to spend more, and that's typically the case in the town academy model. The town academy sets up and it says, look, we will agree to accept all qualified students in return for you voting as a district to spend a little more on us. So in the case of the elementary schools here, these two, they are slightly above the 12,938 minimum. And then for grades 7, 12, the statewide average for coming next school year is 14,773. Burton and St. Johnsbury Academy are both very close at around 16,000. I didn't look up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If a district opts to pay more, are they still subject to the same penalties that Act 60 or 66 currently?
Ooh, you mean like if you're a high spending district?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know. Now, I will say that, yeah, go ahead.
My understanding is both the village school in North Bennington, when it was, excuse me, the public school, and also the mountain school at Windhall, as public schools, those were very expensive. They were already well above the
Yes,
statewide
they were.
average.
Yep.
So this, from what we've been told by he was the principal of the public school in North Bennington, he's now the headmaster of the village school in North Bennington, they have actually had a slight decrease.
Yes, they're spending less in
Their
the
tuition.
school. Unfortunately, the school district budget is up because they are also a member of the Mount Anthony Union and the Southwestern Vermont Supervisory Union, and the costs for those two entities added into the local school budget is pushing it up. You asked me to address the term designation, and so here it is. This is a statutory term, a term of art in education. A designation is a contract between a school district and a school, usually structured so that the school agrees to take a certain number of students, perhaps all of the students, at a set price over a period of years. Designation is getting to be very rare in Vermont. The only, I'm not familiar with the entire landscape of public schools. The only ones I'm aware of that do have designation are the schools down south of Rutland on the New York state line, Wells, Rupert, and there's one more right in there. They have designation agreements with high schools in New York State, in Granville and Salem, New York. But here in the state of Vermont, the only one that I know about is Thetford Academy has designation agreements with Stratford and Thetford. Linden Institute used to have a half a dozen designation contracts with surrounding towns up in the Northeast Kingdom. They let those contracts expire and they chose not to renew them. I think schools generally, whether public or independent, are disinclined to enter designation contracts. Although they want more students, they think they can attract them on their own by doing a good job and being attractive academically, socially, whatever. But you want the flexibility, being able to adjust your budgets as you're going along. The other problem for a sending town is if you enter into a designation contract, that may eliminate school choice depending on how the contract is written. In the case of Thetford, it does. But Stratford, occasionally their board will vote to allow students to go elsewhere if they wish.
That's a quick question. Do you happen to have any data on, say, we take Burton, how many students, I know that draws from several towns, so it's a
Yes,
little
it does.
harder,
Yeah.
but like how many students opt to not go to Burton and go elsewhere to be educated?
I
As a
don't have
percentage
the
of
numbers in my
population.
head, but I grew up down in that region. I'm a native of Arlington, so I know that region pretty well. There are a fair number of children who go to Long Trail School instead of Burton.
Which is in Dorset.
Long Trail School is 10 miles up the road in Dorset. So if you live in Manchester, Sunderland, or maybe up on the mountain in Winhall or Dorset or Danby, the driving distances are roughly the same. So those two are competing. And in fact, Burton went through a dip about 10 years or so ago where they were losing to a Long Trail School and they realized they needed to raise their game a little bit. And then Long Trail School introduced the International Baccalaureate program option, and that kind of brought things back into equilibrium. It's good for everybody. And both heads of school will stand side by side each other and say that. So, and the same thing goes on in the Northeast Kingdom. Linden Institute and St. Johnsbury Academy are 10 miles apart. They both draw students from all over the kingdom. The headmaster at St. Johnsbury said to me the other day that they are drawing children from 45 different towns. Some of those are across the border in New Hampshire, but most of them are Vermont towns. So people are willing to drive to get that level of service and education that those schools can provide. Yes?
Did you say if you go independent, you're still part of a supervisory union? Did you
No,
say-
the school
Okay,
is
I thought
not,
you're out, right?
but the school district is. Now,
I mean,
this
I
is
don't know
going to
if
get
there's
really
any
complicated
distinction,
when you get into Act 46, because if you are a non-operating school district, where do you go? And I don't have the answer to that. In fact, nobody knows the answer right now to what happens. There's, I think it's currently 13 non-operating districts in Vermont, scattered all over the state. How are they going to get merged? Because they can't merge with operating districts. They can't even merge with a district that is K-8 and then tuitioning high school. So nobody has given the answer to how that's going to be addressed.
What were you?
Well, then,
Well,
are you
sort of
still
isn't that the
unclear
point
on
of going independent is if you don't have to merge, they can't make you merge?
Well, no, going independent means you've got a school of your own
Right,
that is outside of the public system,
right.
to which all students in town have the option of going, or they can go somewhere else because now you're a school choice district.
Right.
okay? But the school board and the school district municipality still exists, and it's gonna get merged at some point downstream in Act 46, maybe by 2019. And it's gonna be, continue to be the administrative body who writes the checks for the tuition for the children if there is an independent school and stuff, just as is happening now in all the other places where there are independent schools.
Sorry, just to clarify, so if we're merged, if Stowe School District is merged with somebody else,
Yes.
it's that entity as an entirety that's gonna be sending the school budget to the independent school?
Yeah.
So it's not just the local school
That's
board?
right. And that's where, that in turn means that you've got to get your business done before Act 46 moves you into a different configuration.
Because then there's not a choice.
Yeah.
But even every year with the budget, there's still other influence other than just the Stowe School Board.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Is there a chance that, along with Act 46, that school choice across the board, even for approved schools, could be, gotten rid of completely?
I can't see that happening. I can't. I think the political uproar, if that were to happen, would be too much. I don't think the legislature has the stomach for it. I don't think either that school choice is going to get expanded. I don't think that there's any opportunity. I sat in the education committee this afternoon listening to them discussing the current public school choice situation. As things stand right now, high school students in Vermont theoretically do have school choice. But it is so constrained by protections for the schools of losing and gaining students and not having any financial problems that, as a practical matter, only 2,000 students out of 77, well, no, it's not 77,000, it's probably closer to 30,000, 2,000 out of 30 or 35,000 high school students are taking advantage of it. There's no money following the children. So if somebody from Stowe High School who wants to go down to Harwood, fine. Harwood gets to say whether or not they want them. And since no money is going to follow them, why would they want them? And second, well, then the superintendents have to talk, and they can say, well, maybe somebody from Harwood wants to go to Stowe. So there's a one-for-one swap, books, balance, everything's fine. But if it gets to be one-sided, it isn't going to work. And that was the issue that came up before the board. The people in Westford who have just voted out school choice because they merged with Essex, they used to send most of their kids to Essex, so it seemed nice to join up with Essex. A few kids went to MMU and a few went to Fairfax. And they thought under the current public school choice statute that they could continue to do that. Well, now Fairfax has said, sorry, if you don't bring any money, we don't want you. And so now there's buyer's remorse in Westford, and they've come to the legislature and said, gee, can you fix this? I don't think that's going to happen. Yes?
If Stowe goes to an independent academy, and what influence does the district have over the independent school?
That depends on how you structure the relationship, the contracts. As I was addressing earlier in my slides. So very likely there's going to be a lease on a building. There's going to be a lease on other physical property. There's going to be an agreement on tuition because the school is going to probably want to charge a little more than the statewide average. So all of those things, those accountability measures are all going to be available to the school board as a way of influencing what the independent school does. And the independent school in turn will influence the school board by its actions. It's going to be a give and take. I think, I understand Tom Martin has advised you some here in Stowe on that sort of thing. He's a better source than I because he's living the life right now as the guy who has to manage those relationships between the Board of Trustees of the Village School of North Bennington and the North Bennington School Board. And then the larger Southwestern Vermont Supervisory Union and the Mount Anthony Union.
Can I ask one more question about your last slide? Sorry.
Want me to back up?
Yeah. I'm confused about what you're referring to about the designation slide.
Okay.
what is that referring to, that if Stowe were to decide only to have school choice for Stowe, is that, the Stowe Academy, is that what that is referring to?
No, designation is, it's just, a school district typically will go to a school and say, we've got this group of students, they need a place to go, we need a good deal on a price, what kind of deal can we strike?
Oh,
But lately, and by that I mean in the last dozen years, very little is happening in the way of using designation in Vermont.
Bill, if I could just add to the answer. Designation essentially means that there is no school choice for, if anybody wants to go to Northfield Mount Herman or another school, the money will not follow you, because Stowe has designated the Newtown Academy as our school.
Back in the back?
I just have a question about what kind of money follows the student. So when you, in the previous slide, you had
Yes.
the amount that the legislature agreed upon was like the
Right
cost
there.
for people. So,
This is the minimum amount that has to go.
so is that what follows, so a student wants to go to Northfield Mount Herman because they feel that Stowe Academy doesn't have the
Whatever.
music program or
Or
whatever?
whatever, yeah.
So what money follows that student? Do they pay the tuition of
That right there.
that right there?
Yeah. If you're going outside, away from any other deal, then, and certainly that would mean anything out of state, or even if you want to go to Burton, this is what you get. And then if the school charges more, then it's up to the family to make up the difference.
What if it charges less?
I can't think of one that does.
You get a stack of cash in your mailbox.
Well, I didn't know if it was staying, I didn't know if it was staying.
I won't belabor the point, but I will say that these are rigged numbers. They are artificially low. And anybody who wants to stay after with me, I will explain why. But over the years, it has evolved. I think it started out, the formula for computing the statewide average started out with good intentions, but over the years, it has evolved into something that is beneficial to some and very unbeneficial to others.
No, if I could just add one point, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you choose an independent school, the 14,773 is what follows you. But if you choose a public school, then
Anything that the school charges.
it's
follows.
what the public school charges.
That's right.
The district is obligated to pay. So if for example, Stowe, we're right around that 14,000 per pupil number, but if one of our students chose a public school that charges $22,000 a year, we as a district would be obligated to pay the $22,000.
So that's another area where the system is rigged in favor of the public system versus the independents. But as I was pointing out, you can vote to pay more, and that's what typically happens with these town academies, because the town academy says, since we're being the local comprehensive school, we will cut a deal with you. If you, in town meeting, will vote to pay more, we will provide that comprehensive program. I'm sorry. Yep.
And where,
Go ahead.
where do those funds come from if they vote to pay more?
From the Ed Fund. Yes?
I do just want to make the point that a lot of the students right now who choose to, at the high school level, choose to go to another school, go to Rice. And in that circumstance,
No
that
money,
money would not.
no
follow.
public money can go to Rice High School. That's unfortunate but true. Yeah, because this is a sectarian school. And they're heavily subsidized, by the way. I think their tuition is currently around $9,000. So it would be a good deal, but you can't take advantage of it. Yes?
So to clarify, currently Stowe is an independent school district. If we go independent, then we deal with the Stowe district. But the state may force the district to
If you go
merge.
independent, what you have to do is, as the Stowe School District, you have to vote to close your school. And then you encourage a local group to organize, a nonprofit, to be the local, whatever you want to call it, tallest mountain in Vermont Academy. And it all has to come together real fast and simultaneously. But there has to be an arm's length relationship between the two. You can't have school board members sitting on the board of the nonprofit organization. That's a conflict of interest. So, and North Bennington kind of skated right up to the edge on that before they pulled back and realized they needed to keep those two organizations separate. So within like 2 years or so, you've got to get that done. You've got to get the independent organization up and running and ready to fly. And you've got to be able to get the vote done to close the public school. This is hugely difficult.
But once we've done that and the school's open, there's the district, it's still the town of Stowe at that point, that's gonna fund
Yeah,
this
but then
independent school.
pretty soon,
The
the
state's-
the state is gonna come along and say, all non-operating districts have to get merged somehow. And you as a non-operating district will have no choice in that.
So we'll be forced to merge from a funding level, or we're
But
gonna
you'll
give
still-
up control anyway.
But you'll still be a school choice district. It just will have a different shape and a different electorate. It'll be enlarged. I'm guessing. The state ed board hasn't said what they intend to do with the non-operating districts. They're the ones who have to make the decision. Yes?
If you go down the path you just mentioned, where Stowe is an independent entity, who owns the school, who pays for repairs, how does that all fall?
Currently, well, Tom Martin from Village School of North Bennington can explain to you how things work there. That's the most recent example of how it can be done. Currently, the school district owns the school, owns the grounds, has all of that. As I understand it, the deal in North Bennington is that the Village School of North Bennington is leasing the school and the grounds. They are responsible for a certain degree of ordinary wear and tear maintenance, but major items, new boiler or new roof, the school district will take care of those things.
If you have an independent school that goes all the way down to, let's say, kindergarten,
Or pre-kindergarten.
or pre-K, what would be the responsibility of the elected school board?
The elected school board is always responsible ultimately for the education of those children. They have to see that those children get their constitutionally mandated education. Then, if there's a school here, an independent school here in town that steps forward and says, we volunteer to be the equivalent of a public school, the comprehensive local school, as an independent school, plus we have the privilege of doing other things too, that's how it works.
I'm sorry to be so fixated on the numbers, but I just want to make sure that I understand. So you, let's say under Act 46, no waivers granted, you're a merged school board with a neighboring town. And then we're a school choice town, and we have Stowe Academy. And we would like to set tuition at $16,000 per student, but the state has agreed to the $14,773.
So Stowe Academy goes to the district and
So
says,
we'll
we'll
combine
operate as,
districts.
we offer you this deal. We'll take all the students, except for those who are criminally negligent, dangerous, or completely so disabled that nobody can deal with them in a public school setting or independent school setting. We'll take all the others, and we'll be worth it, every dime of it, if you'll go a little higher. And then the voters in the district approve that,
Meaning in Stowe approved that.
in whatever the district is.
So it goes
Can't
to the whole
have a
district.
choice town and a non-choice town merged.
Oh, okay.
Under
So
Act
that's,
46.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
timing I was talking about in my opening
gotcha.
comments, where we have to make sure, looking at becoming an independent school, we have to be mindful of the Act 46 deadlines and the work that the school board's doing, because if Stowe did decide to join with our other LSU partners into a single district, that would essentially eliminate the option of an independent school, because you would then be a different school district. It wouldn't be Stowe making a decision for Stowe, it would be whatever that LSSU district
You might be
is now
Stowe
called.
plus all the other non-operating districts north of Montpelier.
Thank you.
But they can't force us to merge with other non-school choice districts.
Correct.
Yeah,
That was what.
Absolutely.
if I could jump in, Mill, I think
Yeah.
there are two questions that are going on. One is about what happens with Stowe merging. The one Lisa was addressing is, we have to do this quickly because if Stowe is merged with Morrisville and Elmore, for example, as Mill said, the Stowe School Board is the one that has to vote to close the school. If we're merged with Morrisville and Elmore, the Stowe School Board will cease to exist.
Oh, I understand
Okay.
that. I
Okay,
understand
so
that.
that's that.
I
And
didn't
then,
know
but
you had
your
said that
question-
Act 46
but-
still would require us to be district
Right.
educating 900 students. So I
Right.
that's what I misunderstood.
So, right, and that I think is what is being addressed. Yes, right now, Act 46 says you cannot merge unlike districts.
Okay.
So if Stowe became a K-12 choice district, or non-operating district, I guess is a better term, then they could only join us with another K-12 operating district. The issue is, there aren't any, anywhere near here.
Yeah.
So the onus is gonna be on them to figure out, okay, are you gonna join Stowe with Kirby, an hour and a half towards New Hampshire, or are you gonna join us with something up in the northeast up in the St. Albans area, which is the nearest? So how do you have a functioning school board where people are running for a public office from 3 towns that are 3 hours?
Is it at all possible for
So,
just Stowe?
huh?
Is it at all possible for Stowe?
It
to
is,
have its
it
own-
is.
So, yes, so
There's
they
an
can,
option to go to the Ed Board and say, we deserve an exemption. We already are fulfilling all the things that Act 46 says we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be efficient, we're supposed to be equitable, all those good things. You go to the board and say, we're doing that.
so,
I
so.
can't predict what their answer will be.
You don't know what they're going to do. We're kind of betting, I think, that given the geography of what it would take to merge us with somebody else, they'll say, you can't do it, it's physically impossible, logistically impossible, so we will let you be a standalone. But
Yes.
they may not, and they may change the law.
Are there any independent schools that have gotten an exemption, or that just hasn't happened yet?
Well, it's all hypothetical. Nobody's, that doesn't come up until 2018 at the earliest.
Can I
Yes?
ask a little-
No, go ahead.
And I'm not sure who to direct this to, but so if Stowe became a choice town, would residents be able to choose which independent school they wanted to go to, or? would
Yes.
it- okay.
Absolutely,
Not
yeah.
just
You have
independent
absolute
school,
freedom.
school.
Any
Any
school.
school.
But the money would only follow you if you,
A public school or an independent
school.
school, if it was an approved, if it was in that category of non-religious,
okay.
you know, it needs to be.
Back to the money
or-
again.
or-
So if,
But
if you go down.
we as a
the-
town can choose to designate.
If you
So those are,
decide
that's,
that,
those are 2 options we have. We can become a choice town, or we become a non-operating district that designates. But community has to decide.
If you're a choice town and you decide you think that going to the largest independent school in Vermont is the best thing for your child, that's St. Johnsbury Academy, enrollment of 970, with 300 or so international students, then this is what you're gonna get, 14,773. I don't know what they're charging out-of-town students. I suspect it's probably something around $16,000 or $17,000. So you'd have to pay the difference. But if you've struck a deal with Stowe Academy that says the Stowe Academy will take everybody, just as Burton and St. Johnsbury are doing with their local electorate, then you get the full amount. Yes? Or if you want to go down the road to Harwood, you get whatever Harwood is asking. Yes?
So what happens if, you decide to maintain a public elementary school and then an independent high school like Burton? So
Yeah.
as far as Act 46 is
So
concerned,
now you're
how
gonna
would
be,
that-
you're gonna be operating a K-8 or maybe a K-6 and tuitioning the other grades. So you're gonna
as
be a
far as
lot like,
School boards and, you know, merging and all of that.
right, so
sort
now
of
you're
thing.
gonna be looking for merger partners who are in that configuration.
So it's essentially all or nothing.
Well, I don't know if
Is
it's
it-
all or
is it
nothing,
all or
but
nothing? Is it like-
it's a different option.
Yeah.
We would have to find a like district that had a non-operating high school and operating elementary school, and that would be the only,
That's the only
partners.
answer. Okay.
All right, this is where I get into my summary slides, okay, so I can wrap this up. 3 really key points if you're serious about doing this. One, by the way, this is enormously difficult, okay? So what I'm telling you is what I saw happen in North Bennington. It's based on that. You have to be really well organized and committed. Expect to be opposed every step of the way. And you gotta think entrepreneurially, because starting an independent school is like starting a business. Because the students can walk at any moment. So you have to be good, you have to be attractive, and you have to continue to be attractive. All right, I want to expand on each of those 3 points. You've got a lot to do in a very little amount of time. This Act 46 isn't going to stop for you. You're going to need professional talent to lead the formation of that independent school organization. I mean, I think if you follow the North Bennington model to a T, they hired nearly every existing teacher and janitor and so forth. They just stepped right into the building with their new organization and picked it up and off they went. But it required Tom Martin, who was the very skilled and experienced administrator, to make that transition. So you're going to need professional talent somewhere at the top in the leadership. And you're going to have that sustained community support. The Vermont Ed Board made North Bennington vote 3 times to go ahead with this, because they were so opposed to what North Bennington was doing. They found excuses to pick apart each of these votes, each of the first 2 votes, before they would finally relent and say, okay, you can be an approved independent school. So then they proceeded to vote to close the school, the public school, and reopen it as the village school of North Bennington. I went to public school through grade 12. My father, mother, both were public school teachers. I didn't run into independent schools until I was a parent of children that I sent to the Sharon Academy. All these public schools assumptions are like a fish swimming in water. A fish is oblivious to water, or we're walking around and we're oblivious to the atmosphere. They're just part of life. But there are assumptions about the way school's supposed to work that all of us have if we went through public schools that do not apply in independent schools. And you've got to get at them, think carefully about them. The business of the idea about being business-like, entrepreneurial is one of the most fundamental things. The administrator of a public school here doesn't have to worry about having a budget next year. It may not be all they want, but the law requires that they have one, that they get one. And the circumstances are that most children's families can't afford the full boat tuition to take them out of town. So the enrollment is there, and it's going to be there. Those assumptions have to go by the board when you go independent. Successful independent schools do more than just educate children. They have ties into the community in all kinds of ways. Musical events, sports, you name it. I mean, they are creative in the way they become entwined in the life of the community. I view that as an opportunity, not as an obligation. It's an opportunity to be considered the unusual and do interesting things. A town like Stowe, with this enormous mountain up the road, both cross-country ski center and alpine, those 2 things alone give you opportunities to do things with students that most any Vermont town would kill for. Why is it that Woodstock High School always has one of the best ski teams in Vermont? It's because they've got a little ski area 5 miles up the road from Woodstock. And the kids all join the ski club. They either race cross-country or alpine, and some of them get half decent, and they are real good at the high school level. That sort of thing is an opportunity that any community can seize on if it just looks at its local community resources. You're also going to have to fundraise, because virtually every independent school in Vermont, there's a cost going on. Beyond tuition, there are going to be other costs, and money has to be found to do that. Tom Lovett, the headmaster at St. Johnsbury Academy, says that he figures that when the child graduates from St. Johnsbury Academy, they're going out with an accumulated 4-year addition of around $6,000. And it's going up all the time. But they're getting that money from elsewhere other than just tuition. Yes?
Can you explain how much time we would have to organize versus the amount of time that Bennington had to organize? And then also, how did Bennington go about competing for benefits and retaining the teachers? Make them want to stay.
Let me finish this last slide and then I'll address them. Serious opposition will come up. I mean really serious opposition. You're going to hear from the Agency of Education, you're going to hear from the Ed Board, you're going to hear from your supervisory union. They're all going to say this is an awful idea. It may be. That's up to you to decide whether it's good or bad. But they are not going to like it. And they're going to find ways to put a stick in the spokes of your wheel. You're going to be accused of being elitist because that's the most common myth about independent schools in Vermont. And because this is a relatively wealthy community, they're going to say, oh, those people from Stowe. You know them. And there's the potential for legislative pushback. There was a lot of talk back when North Bennington was wrapping up business about putting an end to this sort of thing, whatever this sort of thing is. It never got off the ground, but it could. All right, so now to your question about timing. North Bennington's timing model doesn't apply anymore. Act 46 is the clock that you have to work against now. And all we know is what's written in the law about timing, which is that by the end of 2018, everybody's supposed to be successfully merged. And if you don't do it on your own, the Ed Board will do it to you. And that's all I can tell you, because nobody has said what that's going to look like for the pieces that don't fit easily.
Let me add one piece of information I didn't give in the introduction. When our local supervisory union looked at what would happen to taxes in the town of Stowe if we did merge with our LSSU partners, Stowe's taxes go up. They go up significantly, and they go up at a much faster rate than they would if we remained an independent school district. So the myth or the aspiration of Act 46 controlling what costs were going to be, the cost containment portion, at least in the case of Stowe, and it's true in an awful lot of other school districts, it's not being realized, and it certainly isn't being realized in Stowe under a district merger.
My understanding of it is if we had an independent school, we would get the same per pupil, pay from the
Yes.
state, that 14,773.
Right.
If the school wanted more money than that, they would have to get approval from the voting district.
From the electorate.
From the
Yes.
electorate. So this,
Yes.
Given the whole non-operating problem, if it was just Stowe, if the school wanted, 17.5 for each kid, the town of Stowe would have to vote on that. So there'd be the protections built into that,
Yep.
that the school wouldn't just open and the
That's
tax
right.
rate would double.
Yeah.
There would still be, the electorate would have the chance to defend
Sure.
against it.
I mean, you can write anything you want into the contract. It just has to be something that'll be acceptable to the voters.
A question with regard to curriculum. I mean, is core curriculum something that has to be implemented? And
Independents
also,
have total freedom on curriculum.
and
I mean,
testing,
well, not
statewide
total
testing
freedom,
and
but
things
the
like that,
state
how does
has-
that play in?
State has very minimal requirements on curriculum. It's just that you have to teach history. That's the end of it, right there. The state, in principle, the legislature always tries to stay out of mandating content. Sorry, your second part of your question?
Was with regard to the testing, the kneecap, and all of these tests that happen.
Any publicly funded student has to take those tests. It's now called the Smarter Balance Test. So yes, any publicly funded student at an independent school has to take those tests.
You're required to take the test, but you're not under the threat of.
That's right. Being found to be a deficient school and a bunch of bad
You're required to
actors,
take the test,
having your
but it
birthday
doesn't.
taken away, none of that happens. And in fact, the school doesn't even have to release the numbers publicly if it chooses not to. Yes.
When you come to outcomes, has there been any experience on schools that have become independent? Have their test scores gone up any?
There's only two schools that we can talk about in that category. Mountain School of Winhall, which went independent about 20 years ago, and Village School of North Bennington. And on Village School, it's too soon to tell. And the people from Mountain School of Winhall say, yes, their test scores did go up quite dramatically, but that's in part because they were the worst performing elementary school in Vermont when they were public. And so anybody coming in probably could have raised the bar. But the school is now very successful, and so I think they're doing just fine.
I'm from Craftsbury, and we have, Craftsbury Academy was originally private.
Yep.
And our lease is just about to come due, our 99-year lease is coming due in 2017 from going public.
Mhm.
And we still have a board of trustees, even though we're a public entity. But would it be possible to transfer, we have a bond on a new gym, we have a bond on renovations in the past couple of years. Is it possible to transfer those funds back to the board of trustees?
Sure, if the school district is willing.
Okay, so it's to our advantage to have that in place already then. to have-
Sounds like you're gonna have a lot of leverage here in another year or so.
It seems to me like if we have a hard time organizing, if we're going to go the independent route, and then we reached the 2018 deadline, and we're forced to merge, that we lose a lot of power in negotiating the contract with Morrisville or whoever it may be. I mean, is that a case? I mean, if.
Yeah, I mean, if you're up against the deadline, now you're confusing the school, the independent school, with the municipality, which remains behind as a non-operating district.
Okay.
Okay, so that municipality is gonna go somewhere under Act 46. It's gonna
Right,
have to
if we didn't
continue to
make any,
function.
if we didn't make any decision,
Right.
then the default would be.
Then they'll
just like
take
Morrisville.
Stowe High School, Stowe Elementary School will get merged in with, under a governance umbrella, get merged with other governance units somehow. I
And you'd
have
still
no
have
idea.
school choice.
Pardon me?
And you'd still have school choice.
You would not have school
Not
choice
have
if
school
you stayed public.
Okay.
But if you do become a non-operating district, then you're looking for a different set of dance partners, merger partners, but you're still gonna have to go to the dance. You're still gonna have to merge, but meanwhile, you're gonna have school choice, which cannot be taken away. All right, if we wanna, I'll wrap up my formal talk, but I have a couple of subsequent slides for anybody who's interested with the language in Act 46 that specifically says school choice under no circumstance can be taken away. Yes, back here?
So maybe Lisa, you could, if we ended up merging with Morrisville, we have less number of people, so we'll have less people on that school board, which means we don't have to, technically, we are underrepresented, we're not, but I mean, whatever we want for our school, we might not get, because they may choose to say, no, we're not doing it like that, and they have the numbers.
Yeah,
So that's where we're playing against. Somebody else is going to be deciding our fate. So if we never wanted to merge, but we're merging now, and we didn't want to even go school, do that whole school swap thing, we won't have any say. And that elementary school and the middle school, like, all that could happen down the road, which was am I wrong? I don't know. I don't want to be an alarmist.
You are correct, and let me take 30 seconds to tell an anecdote from today's State Ed Board meeting that I attended this morning over in Barrie. There's a member of the Ed Board who is on the school board in Middlebury, the Middlebury Union Board. Middlebury is part of a group that just successfully voted to do a merger. Middlebury, Weybridge, Addison, Bridport, I may be missing one or two, but those towns over in the Champlain Valley. And he said that when the votes all came in from each of the old districts on members of the new board, the candidate from Bridport got a huge number of votes from his town, but they weren't enough to get him elected to the new board because of all the votes from all the other larger towns in the new district. Now, they knew that that happened because the old districts are still there this year. But come next year, those old districts will be gone, and they'll never know again because all the votes will be commingled. All right? Yes?
So, it seems like the goal of Stowe going independent is really to maintain the status quo, essentially, to maintain our schools, to ensure that the schools are gonna stay here. In that instance, in your opinion, does it make sense to make this a designated school. I know in other districts, you know, the idea is the school choice, but if we're trying to maintain kind of what we have, and it's a small town, you know, if there is an exodus of students, of
It's an interesting
people going
proposition,
every
and I
other
truly
places.
don't know the answer. That's really pretty hypothetical. I think you first have to get to the point where you've got a clear vision of what an independent Stowe school is gonna look like. And then you need to talk about whether or not a designation deal makes sense. You want the school to be successful, as
Correct.
well as the students in the town. And so it has to be good for both sides of the equation.
But designation can be on a year-to-year basis. You could write a new contract every year,
Yes, you could,
essentially.
and I suspect that that would not be good for the school, because the school would prize having a vision into the future of what its enrollment is
Their
gonna look
teachers
like
want
based on,
stability.
yeah, so I don't know.
But I'm just saying, if we started off that way, you don't have to stay that way, or we don't,
That's
say we
true,
don't
yeah.
start that way, you don't
Yeah.
have to stay that way either. It's not.
I think that's another reason why you want to get a professional school head candidate lined up pretty soon to help lead the organization of this nonprofit entity that is going to be standing by, ready to take over if and when you vote to close the public school. Yes, sir.
So just full disclosure here, my name's Steve Moffett, I'm on the Craftsbury School Board as well. And in a lot of ways, we're sort of struggling with pretty similar issues that you folks are in Stowe as well, on a slightly smaller scale, but, and we as a board are also exploring this independent school rule. You guys are obviously quite a bit ahead of us.
We're gonna get merged.
And, but anyway, my question, and just, this is just a clarity issue for me. So say Craftsbury or Stowe went ahead prior to and became an independent school. From what I just understood, you said, even if you were an independent school under Act 46, you still would have to merge governance? Okay, but you'd have the school choice.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you merge governance, and Stowe wants to spend that extra couple grand per student, does that merged governance have any say in that, or is that a direct town vote? Like, we go to town meeting, we say we're
No, it's
funding.
merged.
That merged
But you don't get
governance-
merged with a non-choice town.
That's right.
So we would be like, it would behoove of us to be merged with like a a town down there that has a
That's right. Or be
similar
our own
interest in
independent.
moving forward. Or,
Yeah.
right, that's obviously the goal, but
We could still ask
if you.
for the alternative structure to be.
Right, and that's obviously the ultimate goal, but other than that, it's not just like, let's see who's closest. It's like, let's find a town that has the same vested
You're
interest
more in your own peer
in
group.
their independent school and the same, yeah, okay.
Is it correct to say we also have the option to keep the elementary school public and take the other grades independent?
Do it however you like.
And that still prevents us from merging with the Morristown
Yep. Yep.
district?
Yes, sir.
To what extent, let's say with St. J, with a boarding school or component, what freedom do they have as to what they charge for admissions?
Total.
I mean, they have total. So that, to some extent, if you had shortfalls and you didn't wanna, and things weren't working out, you could stick a higher price on the boarding students, so the people from China would have to pay more than they would have otherwise?
Of course.
Yeah.
There are a lot of town academies in Maine, there are 9, like St. Johnsbury, that take foreign students, and they do that for the revenue. It gives them a nice, steady baseline revenue to build on. Of course, having an international component in your school adds a great deal of value, I think, to the educational experience, too. I think you and a few other districts are doing this business about thinking about independence. I think that's a reasonable part of your due diligence as you approach Act 46, is to look at these options. And so there may be other districts that choose to do the same thing, to close their public school, become a non-operating district, become a choice town, and operate that way. What it does, fundamentally in the finances, is it changes you from a bunch of fixed costs to a totally variable cost operation. It's however many students you got to tuition that year, that goes right to the budget, and that's it. Yes?
So as, like a positive, like we're, I would say a good model right now. I mean, we're nationally ranked, or at least recognized nationally, we're one of the top schools in the state, correct? At our 7.4, I think 7.2, maybe you guys know, yes? Why, who made the number 900, and why is it, where did that number come from? Because I would feel like this is a model that, why would you wanna, what?
You
what's the
first.
The 900 was a completely, well, I'd say it's arbitrary, but it really isn't arbitrary. There's the number was higher than that.
I heard 1,200 in the beginning.
It was lowered
Okay.
to 900 because there is a very influential member of the education committee from Montpelier. Montpelier happens to have 900 students.
904.
904. Yeah, give a little wiggle room just in case someone moves or something, maybe, yeah.
So the 900 number came out of wanting her own school district to be exempt from the